I wish that the thing would say, oh, there, now it says something about it. One whole second we've been live. Hi, I'm Paul, and here's a whole bunch of other people. And we'll introduce them all in a moment. But we're going to talk about GAMCOD today, growing 1 million calories on dirt. And we're going to talk about why you would care about that and what is happening over the next, I don't know, month, week. There's a lot going on to get started with this project. And I suppose some people might join in as late as April or May, which is cool, fine. But let's just start off. Hey, maybe the people can introduce themselves. I see Tim here. Tim, who the hell are you and why are you here? Okay, maybe we'll skip Tim, go on to Mike.
If I stay really silent and don't move, maybe you'll think this. No, my name's Mike Hazel. Yep, I'm here because I did GAMCOD last year in 2024. I took a bunch of footage, grew a garden on 200 square feet on my crappy sandy soil, or dirt, and filmed the whole process and have some experiences from it. So that's why I'm
cool. Here. It looks like Tim's now animated. Tim, are you able to
Yes, I'm better. So,
who the hell are you and why are you here?
My name is Tim Norton. I am a Permie in upstate New York. I'm going to be participating this year in GAMCOD in my rocky, sandy, clayey soil and hoping to grow a lot of calories.
All right. Next, Rebecca, I see you hiding there in this little tiny window. Who the hell are you and why are you here?
I participated in GAMCOD last year and grew some good calories in my little tiny spot, and I guess I'm here to talk about that.
Where I think you were the champion this year, right? In 2024.
I like that word.
Is that, do I remember correctly? I mean, Mike's here. Am I saying the wrong thing? I'm not sure. Who grew the most calories last year? I think it was Rebecca, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, and Rebecca, you're doing it again this year, 2025?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Do my best. I'm building a house. So, oh shoot, sorry, I'm trying to get my camera to hold still. I'm building a house. So that's the number one priority. So I might not be the winner this year.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And Clay, who the hell are you and why are you here?
Well, I'm Clay, and I am a Permie, and I'm in Boise, Idaho. I'm looking forward to giving GAMCOD a shot next year. I have a couple dirt patches, and my neighbor has an area that's totally dirt that he doesn't use, and so I'm going to try and talk him into letting me commandeer that and maybe do several GAMCOD plots and see which one does best with a couple different methods.
So the general idea at this moment for GAMCOD is that you're going to grow 200 square feet. So that would be like 20 feet by 10 feet. Although I'm not sure very many people actually do that size. You're welcome to do any size of rectangle that you want or an exact circle. And I think in 2024, somebody said, hey, can I grow a dog bone shape? And I said, no. And we're going to get to the reasons why here in a moment. But, you know, a rectangle is good or a circle is good. And you can do, you know, any dimensions you want as long as it is 200 square feet or less. I think some people did something a little bit smaller than 200 square feet. Then the idea is that how many calories did you grow? How much time did you take? Stuff like that. And take video of you doing it. Now, it does seem like in 2024, we had, I think, like 14 people who started. They said, I am doing it. And I think there were 4 people who made it to the finish line. That's my vague memory. And I see Rebecca nodding her head, so she verifies these numbers. And what I was kind of hoping for is that 100 people would be starting, and then we might have more than a dozen that hit the finish line. And then out of those dozen, we might pick 5 or 6 people to be in the movie. And it's like, and then for those people to get in the movie, we've lined up a payout. And so I have a vague recollection that if we use like 20 minutes of video in the movie that is of your attempt at GAMCOD, I think we currently have the payout at $10,000. And that's just, we'll look at the details here in a moment. And then it's double that if you're one of 12 bigs. And I've actually heard back from a couple of the bigs saying that they are going to do it this year. And it's also double if you do it here at my place. And I think for anybody that has poked around in my soil here, I mean, like if you do it up at the lab, I think you guys can confirm. I think there are 3 other people on this call besides me that can confirm. Now that's some gravelly dirt. So it's like, in fact, I know that the one that Steven did last year, 2024, he pulled the dirt out of where a pond was being put together, and boy, there's nothing growing in there. And it's been years to try to convert itself into soil, and there's just nothing. And so he just got buckets of that and hauled it over to where he wanted to build a bit of a hugelkultur. And he did pretty good. So now, okay, did I kind of give a good enough generalization of what we're doing with GAMCOD? I mean, we could talk about the history of trying to do GAMCOD, which never got traction. And so I can hear Clay giggling. Basically, we started off with this idea that there would be an acre, and you grow food on an acre, and how much food can you grow on an acre? And the math says that you should be able to grow several million calories, but it's difficult to find really clear examples with of that without it being farming. And but the stuff from last year is showing that it is not too challenging when starting with dirt, not soil, but starting with dirt, to grow 4 to 10 million calories on an acre. So, Rebecca, do you remember you were like at 35,000 calories for your 200 acre plot. And if that gets expanded out to an acre, I think it was more than 10 million calories, wasn't it? I can't remember. Do you remember?
Read the first because I had a math error and I had more than one total. The first total was 10 million calories, but I think the next one was like 4 million calories when we fixed it all.
Okay. Now, this is a good time to point out that the average person consumes 730,000 calories in a year. So the idea of being able to grow 1 million calories is easily enough to feed one person. On the other hand, if you grow 4 million calories, then in theory, that should feed roughly 5 people. And so, but I also believe that if you're going to do this exact same thing on good, rich gardener soil, it'll be easy to do double that. Does that sound about right to everybody? So, but okay, let's talk about why we do GAMCOD. And I've got there's a GAMCOD forum now at Permies, and one of the threads in there I created just a couple weeks ago because somebody was trying to say that we're doing it all wrong and what we're doing is stupid. And so I needed to spell out in phenomenal detail why we are doing it this way. And so I think the start of it is important. Most of the gardening we advocate is level 5 stuff. So I mean, Permies.com. And so we talk about hugelkultur and polyculture and all kinds of things, really getting into the soil and mulch and we got so many different things that we fine tune and talk about to have a glorious permaculture garden. And but I think that those things are going to seem crazy to most people. And so the idea of this movie is to make it something that's more for level 1 people, not level 5 or level 7 people. So, and I'm referring, of course, to what I call the Wheaton Eco Scale, where it says that anything that's 2 levels ahead looks crazy, or 3 levels ahead looks crazy. So level 5 stuff looks cool to level 3 people, but looks crazy to level 2 people. We want to make a movie that solves some gardening issues for level 1 people. And now I'm going to make some statements here, and I'd love to hear either confirmation or contradiction on these things I'm about to say. So I'm going to list off 5 things. And one of these things I know came from Mike. Like, I had a fascinating conversation with him about one of these things. And it's like, and that's why it's on here. And that's one of the big driving forces of the whole GAMCOD project. So 5 things. Gardening costs. So these are misnomers. These are all statements I believe are bullshit. And so I want to state them, and we will tear them apart in a moment. But I think that this is level 1 people consider the following misnomers to be absolute fact. And so that's what we're addressing. That's what the GAMCOD project is about. That's why the rules are the weird way the rules are. So, first one, gardening costs more than just buying food at the store. Number 2, gardening requires massive knowledge. Number 3, gardening takes an enormous amount of time. It would be wiser to work those hours to get the money to buy food. Next one. Number 4, gardening requires an established garden. And number 5, gardening provides a tiny specks of novelty nibble, not proper quantities of food. All right. I am stating that these 5 things are wrong. They're cheap excuses. They are not the truth. I want to start with the first one because it came from Mike, sort of, kind of. And Mike attended a gardening event. And I think he said that there were hundreds of people in this room. And there was some guy at the front of the room who said, who here believes that they are saving money by growing a garden? And Mike was the only person to hold up his hand. So, Mike, true?
Yep. Well, mostly true. It was a lady doing the talk. It was a major garden conference type setting. And yeah, there were several hundred people in the room. Now, she said it in a way hoping that people wouldn't raise their hand, or she knew what the crowd would say because she obviously had asked that question before. And it kind of sounded like she was hoping people wouldn't raise their hand or it would make her point. But it was anyone who is doing our kind of gardening would have probably raised their hand. And so a room full of people. I was the only one that I noticed that raised their hand to say that they save money gardening.
And along those lines, I think I've had I'm damn near 100 people who've told me that they want me to make far more gardening content, like YouTube videos and podcasts and articles and stuff like that. And while I love gardening, and I want to do all of that, my response has always been like, oh man, YouTube is just flooded with that stuff. There's no need for me to put anything out. And in the last year, I've gone to look at some of that stuff, and it's just, for me, it's a cringe fest. So I can see why people want me to put this information out. And so let me check in with all of you guys. I see YouTube videos where they've gone out and they've bought like a raised bed galvanized thing, and then they bought so-called topsoil to put into it, and then they bought all these tools, and they bought all this fancy fertilizer, and they bought stuff. And I can see how for them, they're never going to get that money back. Plus, I have serious reservations about that so-called topsoil and that galvanized raised bed. So this has been my observation. What have you guys observed?
Same.
Thanks, Mike. Always so verbose. Can you shorten that down a bit?
Yeah, I'll pop in. I have a family member who recently started to garden. We grew up, and my grandmother had a great garden, and hers was fairly simple. And this family member has started to kind of emulate some of that. And I can see the amount of work that they put in, and it seems like a lot. They are a scrounger, and so they got a lot of materials for free, but it's still semi-traditional raised beds with wood that they were able to find, and there's a lot that goes into it. And kind of going back to your points that you mentioned there, yeah, this person definitely believes that it's novelty food. It's not going to replace a majority of their calories. It's a lot of effort, and on the whole, it's not equitable to just buying something from the store. That's a lot easier and more efficient.
Okay, Rebecca, you got anything? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me better?
Kinda. It's super garbled. All right. A little, maybe.
Well, I would just say that most people that grow stuff grow just what they want to eat. It's just tomatoes, basil, an herb garden maybe. It doesn't give us a lot of calories and calories. So we're putting in things that are going to be, like four and I think most people.
Rebecca, I gotta stop you. Is she cutting out for everybody? Is it just me?
She's cutting out for me too. Sorry, Rebecca.
I don't know
Rebecca,
what
by any chance, do you have like earphones or something like that, or a headset or anything like that? I guess we should have done some sound checks before. So I don't know. I don't know what to suggest, but it's like I can't make out what you're saying. I hear your voice go in and out and in and out and in and out. Do you have like a fan going in the room or like other sounds in the room?
Yeah, I have a heater. Is that better?
It is better. Yeah. Right. Tell us. We're talking about, is it So we're addressing the point about the cost being more than just buying food at the store.
Yeah. Some foods are worth it to grow at home because they're yummier than foods you buy in the store, like tomatoes and peppers and basil and carrots. And I think most people would have to totally reorganize the way that they eat to grow their food at home cheaper. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes. Yes.
That's what potatoes, everything. And potatoes are cheap and easy to grow. So that doesn't really help them if they don't eat a lot of potatoes.
That's true. I find that in order for this stuff to work better for me, for us, for the projects we're doing, for the things we want to accomplish, we are attempting to work sunchokes into our diet much more. And we'll talk about sunchokes here in a moment. Tim, do you got anything to add on this point?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of guilty for falling for the YouTuber influencer with the sexy galvanized raised beds and the brand new everything. My first gardens actually were, traditional wood walled raised beds where I imported in a whole bunch of soil, and I didn't know anything about types of soil and how things wanted to grow. So my first 2 years were terrible. Started getting involved in permies and the principles in here, and was actually starting to grow delicious food and food in quantity, learning to take yields. So this is very on point for me. So I'm glad to be able to participate. Hopefully there's a few people that can learn from my lessons and avoid spending a lot of dough and get a lot of calories in the end.
So so in summary, I think that there is a lot of terrible information out there that does make it seem like gardening is expensive. I know I've seen some people like I remember I took video. It had to be like, I'm going to guess 12 years ago. I took video of the hugelkultures that Sepp Holzer created in Dayton, Montana. And I thought they were amazing. Here's all this stuff growing and doing great. And they haven't had any irrigation. In the meantime, things are so dry that the air is full of smoke from forest fires. And some of the comments in that YouTube video were like, it looks like a bunch of weeds. And I think it's true that if what you're expecting from a food garden is a big flat thing with everything grown in rows, then yes, the techniques that we're using look wrong and ugly. And so I like the idea that we're going with a different aesthetic. It's a different way of doing things. We're all going to be pretty pro polyculture, which kind of leads into the next point. Gardening requires massive knowledge, and I think that there is going to be some truth to that if you do it their way, because you have to become an expert in basically everything that you grow. And if you're going to do it our way, but you don't have sufficient guidance, then it's true again. However, I think all of us on this call know that there's ways that a brand new beginner can do it that's very lackadaisical. It doesn't require any substantial knowledge at all. And there's ways to do it. If you're willing to let go of the rototiller and let go of everything being flat and growing in rows, and tilling in a bunch of manure or going to the store and buying tons of stuff. If you're willing to let go of all that stuff, I think we're going to show people a really simple, easy way to grow a lot of food, more food than the rows people, more food than the the fancy YouTube celebrity people with the galvanized raised beds, I think that there is a way to grow a lot of food with almost no knowledge. I'm making that statement. Mike, do you have a response to that?
I would say it's not, or yes, I think you're right, and yet I think in order to, and I think people, this is the one of the 5 points. This is the one where I think people need a little bit of knowledge to be successful at all gardening. And I've been part of a community garden for a few years now as the garden manager, working with new gardeners, and they make some delightful mistakes, or not mistakes, but they're learning, and it's really cute to see some of the things that I would think are obvious, but they don't know. So I think even with our style of gardening, there's going to be some knowledge required, but compared to a conventional garden where you're trying to replace nature with your pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, and you have to know a lot more about bug identification and disease management and all the kinds of things when you're trying to control the whole environment and give the plants what you think they need, versus a more permaculture approach of letting nature take its course, kind of guiding it. I think you do still need some knowledge, not as much to do our kind of gardening, so that is true, but there is still a basic level of garden know-how that you need just to know how deep to put seeds in the ground, and how far apart to have squash, and how many zucchinis you really need to feed your family.
I want to ask you real quick, Mike, while you're bringing up the fact that you're managing a community garden. Are you familiar with Mel Bartholomew's book, Square Foot Gardening? I
am. Yeah, I've recommended it to folks as a way of avoiding some of those problems. So yeah, he's got a good plan and program for beginning gardeners, beginning community gardeners. So yeah, that's a good resource.
I think that he wrote the book after 30 years of managing a community garden and seeing it all. And it's like he's trying to give people a simplified path for success. And I like to think that our GAMCOD project will present something even simpler. But we'll see. So the thing is that it's and that's part of what we're competing against here with this, is that requires massive knowledge, and people are going to make mistakes. But part of the reason why they make mistakes is that they haven't attempted to learn anything. They're kind of like, which is cool, they're jumping in and giving it a try, or worse, they've gone onto YouTube and learned from these people that are spending $50,000 to grow very little food. And it's like, I hope that with GAMCOD, we're going to be presenting something that isn't anywhere else to be found with this project that we're about to undertake. I see Mike nodding your head. I mean, I have never seen anything like what we are presenting in GAMCOD. Have any of you? Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of head shaking. Cool. Mike, do you have anything else about the gardening requires massive knowledge misnomer?
Nope. I think that sums it up.
All right. Let's see if Rebecca's sound quality has improved. Rebecca, gardening requires massive knowledge.
I think that's a load of manure. Put seeds down for it to fully come to fruiting. Then keep learning every year, and it takes a lot. But if you just want to put some stuff in the ground and see, all it really takes is one book or maybe an hour worth of a gardening presentation. That's really all. That's the barrier for a total newbie. Just a few hours worth of education is all you need.
I'm hoping that a person could watch the movie that we're about to make from this GAMCOD project, and that's all they need. And so I can see you laughing. I mean, I think it could be all that a person needs to get going. I hope that's all a person needs to dispel these 5 misnomers, and they can actually go from having never tried a garden to dabbling with a garden. That's my hope.
I think I need to take different footage then.
Really?
Yeah. I wasn't doing it to show this is how you plant parsnips. I was, just showing these are the general methods that I'm using. This is what it looks like at different phases. Here's a cute video of me and my daughter doing it together. That was the kind of thing I caught. People, stuff people want to watch that's entertaining for anybody. I didn't catch like step by step or an edutainment, if that makes sense.
I'm not thinking, I don't think this is going to necessarily be step by step, but I would think that for any one gardener, we will end up with 20 to 30 minutes of their plot. And it would start with, here I am, I've got dirt. First, let me show you how this is dirt. And I've decided to plant certain things. And some things I plant really early, and some things I plant later, and talk about that. Maybe a little bit about like, I'm now going to plant sunchokes. And so this is the time of year to plant them. And here's how I do it. And then now I'm going to plant squash. And so squash seeds are bigger, and this is where they go. And good luck, squash. Then, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be pretty simple and straightforward. I mean, granted, when planting parsnips, yeah, you can make a half-hour video just on parsnips.
Right.
But I also kind of feel like that's not really the purpose of this GAMCOD. It's going to be to, here it is. It's currently May, and this is what I'm doing. Da, 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 da. And then, of course, you can say, I think a good thing for every gardener in GAMCOD to say is like, if this was soil with mulch, I might water it every 2 weeks. Or if this is a 4-year-old hugelkultur bed with mulch, I might not even have to water it even once all summer. But this is dirt. And I got mulch down. That means I'm probably going to have to water it once or twice a week, depending on how hot it gets. And so then there'll be some conversation of that. And then, hopefully there'll be like a little bit of, maybe somebody will make some time lapse. Doop, boop, 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 boop. And then it's like, okay, today's the day I'm going to harvest these things. And then here it is 2 weeks later, and I'm harvesting this other stuff, and I'm going to weigh it. And then of course come in with like the summaries of like, here's how many calories I grew. Here's how much time I put in. Here's how much money I put in. And if I were to buy these foods at a grocery store, it would cost me this much money. And so the dollars per hour, I mean, I think that for a lot of the projects came back like, Rebecca, I think you ended up earning like $20 or $30 an hour for your garden. Is it about right? That's my vague memory.
What? Earning money? Like because of the grocery displacement, you mean?
Yes. So like
Okay.
if you were to take these foods and go and try and buy the groceries, it would cost yay amount of dollars. Not to mention, trips to the grocery store.
True.
And standing in line and whatever else. But so basically, effectively, you ended up with a certain number of dollars per hour if you count it that way. But
cool.
That would be a metric. All right. Gardening requires massive knowledge. And I think that the thing is like at this point in time, while people might appreciate all the details of growing parsnips, I think for the most part, what I want to say is parsnip seeds are small. You don't stick them in very deep.
Hmm.
And then you water it once or twice a week, because we do have the parsnips in there with a bunch of mulch. The mulch makes it so we don't have to water very often.
There we go.
And then we water everything. And so, okay, cool. And then there's the harvest. This is what it looks like when I'm harvesting and I'm plucking it out. And now I'm weighing it. So it's like, you're right. You could easily make a 30-minute information-rich video about growing parsnips. But I suspect that with your GAMCOD contribution, the total amount of time talking about parsnips is probably going to be under a minute, maybe closer to 30 seconds. And it'll be good enough.
Okay. That's good feedback.
I think. So, all right. Do you have anything else to say about gardening requires massive knowledge, the misnomer? No. Okay. Clay, you got anything on gardening requires massive knowledge?
I mean, I fall into the semi-newbie gardener. I built a small hugelkultur that you'd probably hate, but we won't talk about that. And I've done it a few. You know, I've used it now. I think this is my second season using it. And you know, yeah, I definitely made some mistakes. I've learned a lot, but no, I mean, I threw kind of Sepp Holzer style, here are some seeds, good luck. And I've grown a lot of tomatoes. I haven't weighed it yet, but several dozen pounds of squash. I have carrots that are still in the ground, overwintering under some organic straw bales. And so even with my mistakes, I know that I've grown a lot of calories. And so, yeah, I kind of hope to show what it would look like for someone who genuinely doesn't. I've read maybe 2 books and a lot of the Permies forums, but you know, nothing really super official on this is how you garden. And so, yeah, I'll be kind of shooting from the hip with a GAMCOD plot, and you know, show other folks with minimal knowledge what it might look like if they were to try this.
I want to address something just real quick, and that is you're saying that you're a beginner, and that you don't have. And I want to say that for the GAMCOD project, the video that we receive, and I hope that of the people watching this video, that we end up getting more than 100 people trying to participate in GAMCOD this year to submit videos so we can make a movie next year. And when it comes to knowledge, I think the biggest metric of all is so often I keep getting people who are like, I'm going to do the GAMCOD thing. How do I prove that I'm starting with dirt and not soil? And my response is, if you have to ask that question, I think you're qualified to watch the GAMCOD movie when it's done, but I don't think you're qualified to make a GAMCOD video segment for others to learn from you. And I kind of feel like, I don't know, that's a good metric to go by for whether you are a contributor or watching the movie later. What are the rest? So I see Rebecca nodding her head. Mike's nodding his head. Tim looks dazed. Clay's abstaining. So did somebody say? Did you want to say something? Okay, all right. Clay, the thing is that you're saying I'm getting started, but at the same time, you have a big advantage in that you've already read a couple of books, and you're drinking in the stuff from Permies.com. And so I think you're going to be ahead of the ball compared to anybody who's never grown a garden before. I suspect that you know the difference between dirt and soil. True? Yes. Okay, you're nodding your head. And then the next thing is like when you make a video, either you already know how to demonstrate that it is dirt and not soil, or you'll look it up. Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. Do you have anything else to add about the massive knowledge thing?
I think I'm good.
Yep. Your turn, buddy. Gardening requires massive knowledge? Question mark.
I think one of the things, at least on my plot, that I want to show is, at least when I first started gardening, I thought, you know, these are very delicate things. You have to control so much. You have to watch them so much. There really are plants that can thrive on neglect, and that there is a bit of a gray area of forgiveness. I've done similar to what Clay did the second time around, where I cut back a bunch of bushes to just reveal a bare patch, had a bunch of seeds, tossed them out just to see what comes up, and I was relatively shocked. First time I've grown watermelons, first time I've grown amaranth, and I actually got yields that I saved last year from it, compared to traditional garden where you're placing everything precisely and you're watering it, you know, very carefully. Knowing what thrives in your soil and your climate, that little bit of knowledge that can pay dividends. But I don't think you need to know the etymology of each of the plants you're growing. You don't need to have that much. It's nice to have, perhaps, but really it's having a patch of soil, some seeds, and just giving it a whirl.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the things like companion planting, that might come a season or two later, and over time you get better at that. But the first year, stuff will come out of the ground. Like, just throw the seeds out there. You'll get something.
Exactly. And then you'll learn each year of, all right, this kind of squash works really well for my area. I'll grow that again. Or you might have a plant that doesn't set well, and you might look for a different variety, a different type local to you, and then you might see successes the next time. It's just building your knowledge season after season. You'll do better and better and get the yields that you really want.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I want to move on to the next misnomer. Gardening takes an enormous amount of time. It would be wiser to work those hours to get the money to buy food. And a lot of times when I have heard people actually say this out loud, then they say it's cheaper to work at McDonald's, that Scottish cuisine, and get paid by the hour there, and then use that money to buy food than it would be to grow a garden. And I think that I've heard people say that, and I think if you're going to go out and buy $40,000 worth of gardening gear, I think that it does become true. But let's address the misnomer. Gardening takes an enormous amount of time. It would be wiser work. Those are so the time, just the general time. And I think that with our techniques, we're looking for either a lazy way or a very easy way. I mean, granted, and in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of weeks I do this again, but with Mark Shepard, because he's going to try and do a GAMCOD this upcoming season. But I also believe that he's going to submit a whole bunch of video talking about how growing annuals is stupid and you should be growing perennials.
Fantastic.
And which is true. He is correct on that point. I hopefully he'll see this video first, but he is correct. At the same time, I think that when you are when you've never grown a garden before, that you're not ready to really think about perennials so much. You know, some people who've never gardened before might be willing to buy a bush or a tree at a nursery and stick it in their yard or something. But for the most part, when we're talking about food systems, they're going to start by thinking about annual crops. Now, I love the idea of GAMCOD, and I think that Mark is going to go ahead and try and grow 2 or 3 GAMCOD plots to show off different strategies that he likes, and then have like maybe 30 seconds of like, look, I mapped out 200 square feet of a perennial system. Let's measure the calories on that. And it's like, just to prove my point that annual crops are stupid. Okay. It takes an enormous amount of, I think it's possible to do something where you're going to plant some seeds, lay down some mulch. You're going to turn on a sprinkler a couple of times a week. You're going to harvest. And I think it's good to, like, when you're calculating your hours, it might be good to, like, once you get the total amount of food, to maybe gauge like how many trips to the grocery store, are saved from that. That'd be good. But it's like, I do think that a lot of the results that I saw from 2024 was the amount of time put into growing this GAMCOD plot was pretty small. I know, like, Stephen counted his hours of, like, he would turn on some form of irrigation and then walk away and do other things and then come back and turn it off. And from the time that he started it to the time he turned it off, he counted all that time, even though he was off doing something else. And I kind of think in hindsight, buddy, we should count the like minute to start and the minute to stop, not the whole hour that you left the sprinkler on or whatever. So, Esther Allerton. Does everybody remember Allerton Abbey? Some of us don't have the energy to work a proper job. My GAMCOD bed fed me loads. After I'd planted it, I basically just harvested, though we did put drip irrigation in. One of these days I should make a podcast about my concerns about drip irrigation, but way to go, Esther. Most people love drip irrigation. I'm just a person that doesn't, but that's just me. However, you just kind of set it up and walk away, and everything is kind of pretty much automated. You don't think about it. It's like, it's all good. All right. Enormous amount of time. Mr. Hazel, what's your take on that?
My take, that's one of the things I love about this GAMCOD idea. In addition to growing on dirt, we're trying to show that we can grow a bunch of calories without a lot of time, without a lot of imported materials and cost. So it's cheap, it's low effort or low time effort. Yeah, my garden, counting the time spent doing gardening and making the garden bed, doing all this stuff, was 4 hours and 39 minutes. So
wow,
that's pretty
That's
good.
impressive.
My guess is that for the amount of food that you got, like for the total calories, it might have saved you 6 trips to a grocery store in total, just counting calories and an average grocery store trip or something.
Sure.
And it's plausible that your hours then end up being a wash. Does that sound about right? So your hours, if you're going to fiddle-faddle with that kind of thought, it might turn out to be that your total hours ends up being 0, if you'll allow that.
Sure, I could allow that. Half of that time could be eaten up and going to the store to buy the stuff that I was growing anyway. Just that time. Not to mention, the food I produce, the value, how many dollars per pound for better than organic food. That's, and compared to a working job. Yeah. So I like that element of this project, being able to show that you can grow without spending an hour a day in your plot.
Ooh, good phrasing, because I believe that there are a lot of people where hour a day or 5 hours a day or every evening and all weekend long is what they're thinking of as time commitment. And some of those YouTube channels, they do kind of seem to suggest that. And so I like the idea that what the GAMCOD project is about, like, let's get our time footprint down to about nothing, and our expense. How much did you spend on your plot?
And I was just doing the math as you talked. I think I'm into it 2 minutes per day was my average. Money wise, let's see, I spent around $1, give or take it.
It seems like there were quite a few that were like that, where the total amount spent on seeds or whatever was about $1. Sometimes it was because, like, sunchokes. Well, I just went over the sunchoke plant that I already had growing over there, and I just grabbed some sunchokes and I stuck them in the dirt over here. There's a bit of that kind of thing going on. And then it's like, well, I had some seeds left over from last year. I wasn't sure if they'd be any good. And so, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's fair. That we're
out, and so I'm running off my laptop battery, and I'm on my cell phone's internet. So wow, I feel clever all of a sudden. I can't read my notes because that's on a screen that runs off of the power grid, but neat.
Yes.
Do any of you have that document pulled up? Clay does.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Oh, power just came back on. All right. Mike, when it comes to enormous amount of time, do you have anything else to add to that?
Nope. It does not take an enormous amount of time.
So I see Stephen has joined us. So Stephen is the boot camp high commander for here at my place. But he's on the road right now, so I'm amazed that he was able to join us at all. But you grew a GAMCOD plot here. And so, Stephen, we were kind of going over the 5 misnomers that we wish to address that I think level 1 people have. Most level 1 people considering the following misnomers to be absolute fact. And so we've already touched on 2, but I'd love to hear your feedback on those 2. And we're working on a 3rd. Maybe you'll touch on that. But the first one is the first misnomer that level 1 people have is gardening costs more than just buying food at the store. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We didn't spend any money on seeds. And I think that, well, in the case of Wheat Labs, the time that we had spent was built into the boot day. And I think over the entire summer, we spent, 20 hours total. I mean, I sort of heard what Mike had said earlier about his budget expense, which was incredibly cheap. So we're consistent with what Mike had said. And yeah, it doesn't. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it costs any more than what you would spend at the store. Certainly not. And in fact, it seemed incredibly cheap compared to what you pick up at grocery.
Okay. Yeah, I think that part of what we talked about was how a lot of YouTubers spend like 20 grand or 40 grand to put together a little backyard garden made out of like galvanized raised bed gardens, and they buy so-called topsoil, which I want to emphasize, never buy topsoil. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. I think we've covered that in other podcasts. It's always a bad idea to buy topsoil.
Yeah, I think that Home Depot loves those people.
So let's see. The next item was gardening requires massive knowledge. And while I think that can be true, and for the stuff we advocate, hopefully that this movie will make it so that people can start to garden and they don't need massive knowledge. Like this this movie will be all that they need to get from never a garden, having never gardened before, into their first garden. But do you think that for the techniques that you used, that you could convey it easily to somebody that's brand new to gardening?
Quick answer is yes, absolutely. Does gardening require knowledge, expansive knowledge? Absolutely not. I don't know where people got that idea. They might have to qualify and say, do you have to do gardening right? Does it require tremendous amounts of information to do it right? It's debatable. But to get started, to get a brand new garden and actually have some results, no, I don't think you need much knowledge at all.
All right. And then the question, the misnomer that we're addressing right now, which you can chime in on, is gardening takes an enormous amount of time. It would be wiser to work those hours to get the money to buy food.
I really feel like I've been out of the normie job and the normie expense kind of thing for a while now, so I don't know if I have an informed opinion on that anymore. But the thing I can say is that I think we spent maybe like $4 or $5 on seeds tops. You know, the water is a well, and I don't have a clue on. The well was powered by solar power, so it's like, you know, we were able to draw water without spending money on that. So I wish I had a better answer for that. But personally, no, I don't think it has to take much. Paul, you're more on that side of things than I am. I'm just out there doing the gardening work, and I say, hey man, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, and you say okay, or no, don't do that, do this instead. So that's all I can say about about what goes on in terms of how much it costs. I'm sorry, I don't have much more of an answer for that.
I'm gonna guess that the grocery, I mean, I don't recall us ever looking this up for your GAMCOD plot, but I'm gonna guess that the dollars, like if we were to go to the organic grocery store and try to buy the food that you grew, I would, just shooting from the hip, I'd guess it would be $500. Could be more, could be less, but roughly $500. And you said 20 hours. So basically, in a way, you were earning $25 an hour doing that. But something we talked about earlier is that if you're going to, if that food were to, so let's say, save 4 trips to town, you know, and that expense and that time, then it'd be even more than that. We might be closing in on $30 an hour, you know, for that time. I like what Derek just posted here in the chatty chat. He says, I would rather garden than work. And so I think that's a real good one. All right. Steven, you got anything else right now about gardening takes an enormous amount of time?
No, I think it's time well spent regardless. I mean, there are many other benefits for gardening from just the food you harvest. That's my opinion.
All right. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you to speak slowly so we have a better chance of understanding what you're saying. But I'm going to put it to you. Gardening, the misnomer, gardening takes an enormous amount of time.
It doesn't take an enormous amount of time, but it does take consistency. And I think that's where people get it twisted in their head, that I can't be consistent, so I don't have the time.
That is a really good point. That is kind of the Achilles heel of everything that we're advocating for. Excellent that you point that out. So it's true, if you don't water it for like 2 or 3 weeks in the middle of summer, it could all be over. It could all be done. I mean, granted, you'll still have built some soil, and other things will, you know, try to repair the soil and whatnot. But overall, if you didn't have that little bit of give a shit, that little bit of discipline, then it's not a huge amount. But the other thing is too, is that when you're excited about it. Or I think, I think the one of the audiences I really want to appeal to is going to be people that are having a hard time making ends meet, which I understand is only 70% of the population. And it's like, not only does this basically pay you in a way, a manner of speaking, like obscenely pay you quite well, especially when you move on to perennial systems eventually down the road. But even more than that, it gives you safety, which I think is something that so many people are stressed out and depressed and having a lot of mental anguish. And the idea that your food systems are effectively taken care of. It's like if things in your life go sideways, then, and if you're growing half your calories, half your food system, half your food could easily be converted to all of your food in a pinch. And the pinch doesn't necessarily, like so many people talk about zombie apocalypse or all the other apocalypses. And it's like, there's other things that could be just like having a rough year, And I remember growing gardens decades ago, and I had a rough year. And my gardens, I really put the time into them and got so much more food out of them. And I canned a lot of rhubarb that year. But what a relief. I'm so glad that I had planted all those things years earlier, because when my rough year, and it wasn't a zombie apocalypse or anything like that, it was just me having a rough year for one reason or another. And other people have a rough year for one reason, but at least it's always there to support you if things go wonky for a short while, or if there is the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is a different way of looking at value, is that I could put more hours into my job. That's not necessarily going to bring me better quality of life, even though it might bring me the dollars to pay for my groceries. And if I put more hours into my garden, I do have a better quality of life. I garden personally for mental health. There's the sunshine, there's the fresh air, there's my hands in the dirt, which is all kinds of goodness. And that brings me a lot more out of my time, out of my 2 hours that I spent in the week gardening. I got so much more than I would have if I'd have spent 2 more hours at my worky job.
I love that. I think everybody on this call can agree that gardening, like 2 hours of gardening is more soul building. Well, 2 hours of gardening is dramatically soul building, and 2 hours at any worky job is soul draining.
Absolutely.
I mean, there might be some people even on this call who have a worky job that is utterly lovely, and then and for them it is soul building to go to their worky job. But I don't know. I think for every person who goes to a worky job and it's soul building, I think that there's a dozen where it's soul draining. So, so I'm going to read the thing. So there's a comment in the the chatty chat that Andreas has put up on the screen. It says, "I already work full time. The garden can supplement my crappy income and be a kind of therapy." There you go. All right. Rebecca, you got anything else about gardening takes an enormous amount of time?
That's it.
Okay. Clay, you're up.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with what Esther had said earlier. A lot of my time was spent harvesting. I didn't do GAMCOD this past year, but I did grow probably about a GAMCOD's worth of space. And I spent maybe a few hours planting. I have sprinklers, and I literally flip a light switch and they come on. And so most of my time, I didn't spend any time weeding or caring about that stuff. And I had a decent crop, several decent crops and decent harvests. So yeah, no, I don't think it takes an enormous amount of time. I did see in the chat that there might be benefit. Folks think there might be benefit to spending more time, and you might grow more if you did choose to spend more time. But I think that there's a level of diminishing return there, and so if you take a plot and you spend zero time other than planting and harvesting, and then compare that to the effort that you spend on the same plants where you are meticulous, I wonder how much more you would get, and if you would then look at that and say, okay, that time doesn't equate to enough return for me to continue doing that in the future.
So I agree with everything, and it can be incredibly easy. And I hope that that's the thing that we end up documenting is the whole. It takes so little time. It's just a tiny amount of time in order to be able to do this. Of course, there is the caveat of paying attention and caring about it does matter. So, all right, Tim, you're up.
Everyone had really good points. I think the only thing that I have to add with my plan for GAMCOD, the most work, which is still only a little bit, will be at the very start to establish the bed. And it's my hope after that fact, it's just maintenance. So hearing about 4 hours maybe to get the bed established, I think that seems more than reasonable. And then just the weekly, I'm hoping to do something like a weekly schedule, not necessarily a daily, of just maintenance items to get a harvest. We will see.
I would think like every 3 weeks or so, a person might spend something like 20 minutes doing a little chop and drop mulch. And the whole GAMCOD system does allow for a ghost acre. So if you want to have this whole acre over here growing a whole bunch of something that you use as fertilizer or mulch or something, that's all cool. And that could add some time to it. But even still, I think that the total amount of time is going to be pretty small.
A minimal investment.
Next up. Oh, you got something else, Mike?
I was just going to mention one little thing. It seems like Tim, one thing we might have going for us is that occasionally irrigation comes out of these big puffy white things. So I never watered my garden all last year.
Wow.
And I also went to Wheaton Labs for a month. Just nothing was done on it. So part of my setup was knowing I was going to be gone and knowing I wouldn't be there to water it. It isn't always like that, but I've built that into my garden plan. So we might have an advantage there. They get more sun though.
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, excellent point. That is an excellent point. So basically, it mitigates the Achilles heel we talked about earlier that Rebecca brought up, which is that you got to kind of be paying attention to know when to. Like you can't just skip your watering when it's dirt. If you've got good soil, mulch, hugelkultur, yeah, you can skip worrying about the watering completely. But Mike, it sounds like you've got enough rainfall throughout the growing season that you don't even have to do any of that. You probably have some mulch laid down though.
Yeah, I mulched a lot, and we got a lot of rain last year, so it was almost too much. I was too wet, and I think I had some crop failure due to it.
Okay. The next misnomer number 4, gardening requires an established garden. So of course, this whole thing that we're doing is we're saying it's from dirt. We're going to grow 1 million calories on dirt. And so, however, I think maybe a lot of people that would have never gardened before, they don't know the difference between dirt and soil. And so that would be part of what we're going to teach them. But every GAMCOD video that ends up in the movie is going to have a demonstration of like, see, this is dirt. And hopefully it'll also have a little bit of like, see over there, I'm growing a garden that's roughly the same size on soil. And see how it does. I don't have to work as hard. It's all easy. but this project is about dirt. Mike?
Yep. And that's the whole point of GAMCOD, is that we're all building gardens from nothing. We're creating these gardens to show that anybody can start a garden, even on dirt, if you're stuck with it. So yeah, I think just by doing GAMCOD, we're dispelling the idea that you need to have a garden to do this, because many of us already have gardens, and we're doing this on extra ground just to start from scratch, just like anyone else would have to.
I'm hoping that we get at least one GAMCOD submission that starts from a lawn. Like here's a big lawn. Oh, and Rebecca's waving her hand. Okay. And so
I did.
All right.
Mine was from a lawn.
Yours
what do you want it out?
Okay. All right. Well, first let's have you begin with the misnomer. Gardening requires an established garden.
Oh, it does not. I grew my GAMCOD garden from my lawn.
Now, I think there's two general approaches. One is to turn your lawn, like to rototill your lawn, and the other would be to just smother your lawn. And there are people that have horrible recipes for smothering a lawn that I hope nobody in the GAMCOD project will ever attempt. I think that there's ways that are easy and delightful, but one could also rip up a lawn and in order to build a hugelkultur bed. What did you do, Rebecca?
So I spent a lot more time than Mike to establish my garden, because instead of using a rototiller, I dug it by hand to get all of the grass roots out. And I don't think that was worth it, because a lot of the grass roots grew back in by the end of the season. And so I think I would do it differently this year and smother it with mulch.
Yeah, smother with mulch. I think when you're starting with a lawn, first of all, I'm going to advocate hugelkultur every single time. But I also respect that there's going to probably be most of the GAMCOD submissions are not going to use hugelkultur. And that's fine. But I prefer the idea that it's smothered with mulch and only mulch. I believe I've detailed somewhere that use of any cardboard or newspaper is forbidden in the GAMCOD project. I hope that I've got that clearly documented. There are some forbidden things, and it's because I want to be able to show it can be done without those things. And there's a lot of people that think that you have to use cardboard or newspaper to smother, and it's no, you don't. But you attempted to dig and you paid the price, because those grasses are persistent. They've stored up a lot of carbohydrate, and they're ready to take over despite your efforts, which is hilarious. So, but the big thing, I love that you started with the lawn, though. That one, because if nothing else, with the lawn, it is in effect, it's a type of organic matter that you're starting off with. So it's not exactly soil. Most lawns are on dirt, but when the sod starts to decompose, it feeds the soil. All you got to do is to get it to decompose.
Yeah.
So, Rebecca, do you have anything else about gardening requires an established garden? Okay. Stephen, you're up.
Gardening does not require an established garden. I tried to document as well as possible our process of building a hugel for our particular GAMCOD plot, and it was an 8x20, 8x25 mound of dirt with logs interspersed in between, and that's what we started with. It didn't look like much after that first week. Things really hadn't taken off, but then soon the sunchokes picked up. And by the end of the season, one entire side was covered with pumpkin. So if I don't know, I love what Rebecca had said about consistency. Keeping an eye on it, And one of the things that Paul says all the time about gardening is the best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. And he may have said that already, and I just missed it because I wasn't in for the whole call. But um, that's that's what's required for a garden. We had silty clay, like dirt that we dug out of the bottom of a pit. I mean, again, this is all documented in the videos I've submitted about our first effort. And we're probably going to grab the dirt from the same spot for this coming year, this coming season. And there was nothing special about that. There was nothing growing in it prior to that. We just like put a couple logs in between the layers and maybe a blob of mulch here, a blob of kitchen scraps here, and then that was it. There were no other like special things. Again, didn't go to Home Depot for any of it. Didn't have to pick up a bag of manure or humus or anything like that. It was just we put a bunch of elbow grease in there. That was essentially it.
Cool. Oh, look,
there's
there
me
you
and
are. So, first I want to say that the best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. That's something I'm glad to echo. I have no memory of where that came from. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that's hundreds of years old, that expression. So, Clay, gardening requires an established garden.
Yeah, I also agree with what other folks have said. No, I turned my lawn into a couple hugelkultur beds, and had an awesome garden the first year and an even better one the next. So yeah, very much no. You can get started this season. Go ahead and don't let that stop you, and get something in the ground. Just plant, as I've heard it said, and see what happens, but also kind of expect something good to happen with that too. I think Tim.
Are you planning this year to make another hugel in the lawn, or?
I am very tempted. I have to. I am nervous, kind of going back to the soil point about my lawn might be too much soil to count. I'll have to do some tests and see. But that's whether it's my lawn or the blank spot in my neighbor's area. I have the wood. I cut down some trees, and so I'm thinking that's at least for one of my plots. I'll try and do some hugelkultur, kind of similar to what Stephen did, I think, this year at the Allerton Abbey spot.
I feel like I gotta fess up. I'm planning on doing a spot in my lawn. I think I have the opposite problem of you, Clay, as it can barely grow lawn. So it will be a fun experiment. I'm confident it is dirt. But my plan was kind of echoing Rebecca, digging the lawn. After hearing the grass came back, we might have to reevaluate the plans. But I'm thinking of going with a double dig method. And seeing what we can pull out from there.
Double dig sounds like a lot of work to me. I mean, I'm very familiar with double dig, and how the second dig is not as diggy as the first dig, but I still love the idea of something even simpler. And I also kind of feel like, as long as you got your shovel in there, why not make a hugelkultur?
True.
So
true.
And at some point in time, I mean, I'm bonkers about hugelkultur, but if you're going to do something, and Steve and I have gone over this many times, like if you've got a plot of land that is 8 feet wide, which is what Stephen did, and if you have a hugelkultur that is 8 feet tall, you've almost doubled your growing space. So you've almost doubled the amount of food that you can grow, which is kind of part of what we're shooting for. However, making a hugelkultur that's 8 feet tall is a substantial amount of work, but the payoff is for decades, which could be worth documenting. But as long as you're digging, I would suggest making it into a mound for a buffet of reasons. But then again, I'm bonkers about hugelkultur. I hope that when we're all done with GAMCOD, that the most successful GAMCOD plots are hugelkultur plots. That's my hope. All right. Anybody else got anything about gardening requires an established garden? All right. The last misnomer: gardening provides a tiny speck of novelty nibble, not proper quantities of food. And I think that the GAMCOD plots that were done in 2024 demonstrated that is not true. The sheer volume of calories, which is a big focus of this whole project, is the calories, not because some people grow a garden and they grow some spinach and some kale, and tomatoes are not famous for having a lot of calories per acre. So they grow some things that are fun and stuff like that, but not the giant mega calorie angle stuff. So I kind of feel like a caloric focus is important and not just a novelty nibble. So, and all right, let's start with Mike. Mike, what you have any thoughts about this misnomer?
Yeah, I believe that is a misnomer as well. I wonder a side note, I wonder how much of it is related to people who do or don't cook a lot of food. So if you're cooking a lot of meals, you might be used to using things like potatoes and onions, like the historical crops of or the past 500 years, especially annual crops. So I think there's an element of, if you don't cook much, when you do a fancy little meal, maybe you just need some herbs or a tomato. So you're used to growing nibbles instead of growing the calories. So I love the focus on calories. And yeah, we showed you can grow a fair number of calories. I'm sticking either sticking potatoes in I think I'm planting potatoes right there. So yeah, I got over 30 pounds of potatoes out of a fraction of, or maybe a quarter of my GAMCOD plot.
I kind of feel like you've touched on something that's really important. Some people are kind of like, they don't eat food unless it is coming out of their microwave oven or it's coming with a knock at the door, or they're at a restaurant, and that's pretty much it. Sometimes they'll buy stuff that comes in a package that they can eat as a snack, and that's kind of like 100% of all the food that they eat fits into one of those categories. And so, what we're proposing is that there would be probably some cooking involved. I mean, there are some of the foods, like strawberries, for example, you could eat those just directly off the plant. Tomatoes would be another example. But our high calorie foods tend to require some degree of cooking. Like sunchokes would be an example. You can eat sunchokes raw, but I think most people would want to cook them. And then squash would be another. I don't even know if squash is edible when it's raw or palatable when it's raw. I've never tried to eat raw squash. But any kind of grain, except with the exception of sweet corn. Sweet corn's a grain, and you can eat that right off the stalk. You don't even have to cook it. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like a big part of what we're shooting for here with the GAMCOD. I mean, I want to start talking about apples, but not yet. So I kind of feel like, yeah, there is a certain amount of cooking involved. However, I kind of feel like the people that are going to be eating strictly at restaurants and from the microwave and things of that nature, those are not necessarily our audience. I think that there are some people that do some degree of cooking or they are open to the idea of growing some or doing some cooking, in which case their first ever garden would be a great place to start. Can you guys think of anything that you would grow in a GAMCOD plot that you would just eat straight up, like normally?
Like lettuce and greens, I wouldn't necessarily grow them in a GAMCOD plot for the calories, but that's definitely something a lot of people would eat if they were just growing a garden.
I like radishes and turnips, and radishes are cool because you can plant them in the beginning as well as the end of the growing season, and still get a good yield from the plants. That's what I would do.
Yeah. Still, all these things are not high calorie crops, which is what we're shooting for.
Okay.
I think something as a new gardener, they say, grow what you eat, but gardens are a great opportunity to try different things and, try new recipes. I know that's something that I'm new to. I didn't grow up with a, let's say, vegetable cooking friendly family. But kind of part of the beauty of Permies is being able to ask people's favorite recipes, favorite uses for vegetables that you might not be used to, but now you can grow.
So I think that there's a lot of reasons to grow a garden, and I think that the GAMCOD movie is going to be focused on how to grow a million calories, how to grow plenty of food for your family with little effort, little money, and then what it does kind of depend on what are you going to eat, and if people are going to only eat foods that are already prepared, then gardening is going to be a bit of a challenge, and it goes into a whole other space. But Mike, do you have anything else about gardening provides a tiny speck of novelty nibble?
No, I think a lot of people believe that, and we're dispelling it.
Okay. Stephen, you got anything on this?
Anything to add to that? Well, I don't want to touch on nutrition, but I will talk about that if somebody is intensely gardening a smaller space, and this is something that Paul, while I've been on the road, I've been listening to old podcasts. So somewhere in the 270 something range, you were discussing things with Jeff Lawton back in the day. And he mentions, and you totally agree with him, that whenever you're intensely gardening a smaller space, again, not going to talk about nutrition because that's not what GAMCOD is about, but you can increase the diversity because you're spending a lot more face time essentially with that smaller space, and you can look and also similar to what Tim was just talking about, I think, where you can have a chance to try different things that you normally wouldn't. When somebody has spent most of their life eating corn and potatoes and wheat as part of their diet, they can diversify from that, and they can receive protein from other different types of vegetables. So that's another. I think that's another bonus for having a small garden space to work with and focusing on that. Yeah, maybe I do want to try to make kale. I've never tried to do that, or Swiss chard, or what are golden beets all about? Let me try some of those. So those are all we tried sweet potatoes this year as a first time attempt in Montana, or at least in our section of Montana for sweet potatoes to see if they would grow. And I did look, Paul. I did look at some of the sweet potatoes of that same variety that we grew at the grocery store, and even though there were these weird red wiggly things that were almost like they were like an inch in diameter, they were like long deflated balloon kind of things, but that they were selling those at the grocery store. So I mean,
do you remember how much they were selling them for?
It was somewhere between $4 and $5 per pound. So Yeah. Sorry, Rebecca. Yeah. I see you choking a little bit there on that announcement. But I would say that you can experiment with diversity. Totally agree with what Tim was talking about in terms of trying new things. And I think part of the requirement for excuse me for GAMCOD is that you need at least 5 different vegetables in order to consider it a valid GAMCOD project plot. I seem to recall that number. So this is a great excuse for you to be able to check that stuff out and try something different.
So, Grand Champion Rebecca, what are your thoughts on gardening provides a tiny speck of novelty nibble, not proper quantities of food?
Well, one of my favorite gardeners says not to grow what you are used to eating, but to find out from other gardeners in the area what grows so well you can neglect it and it'll still produce. So that requires a change, like we've been talking about. If you're just like a French fry kind of person, scrubbing up a potato is difficult, but this is even like another level up. Like sunchokes grow so well, you can cut them back and they'll still do their thing. But it requires learning a little bit more about sunchokes because, when I'm going to feed my family, I can scrub up 8 fat russets and it takes this much time. But if I'm going to feed them the same amount of calories of sunchokes, I'm going to do a lot more scrubbing, a lot more cutting, and even some different techniques. And the same goes for parsnips that grow really well for me. And so it just, for the level 1 gardener, that is a necessary shift. What can I grow a lot of and will I eat it? And how can I eat it? And, wrapping their cooking brain around that.
I think that's a really good point. I know that we have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of walking onions growing here.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who come here as a cook, which would include you, Rebecca, you've been here, I believe, twice as a cook.
Yeah.
I remember this last summer, Kat was cooking something and she tried to use the walking onions. Well, she did use the walking onions several times, but she complained every time because the regular onions were like I'm gonna say 4 times easier to prepare.
Yeah, they're massive compared to a walking onion.
Yeah, but on the other hand, to grow standard onions takes a certain amount of effort.
Totally.
It's not an enormous amount of effort, but you're going to, do something. You're probably going to start from sets or something like that. There's to grow onions, regular onions. There's a little bit of work that goes into it. The great thing
Helen says.
Oh, what did Helen say?
The onions like to be weeded. It takes more intense gardening because they don't do well with competition. And those fat onions that will feed a whole family, you gotta spend more time on those. Walking onions, you can be in the field and do nothing to them all year.
Yeah, and if you do nothing to them 3 years in a row, you'll just have like 100 times more.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, what have I done? They've taken over everything. And so it's like, oh no.
The ease of gardening, that has to translate into your kitchen skills. So you might grow something that's really easy and high in calories, but it's maybe going to take you more effort in the kitchen. I just saw pictures. Go ahead.
I like the idea that you might do both. Like when you got the gumption to grow the things that will be easy for the kitchen, then do that. And then, but if you don't get around to it, well, here's 10,000 walking onions and 800 pounds of sunchokes. And it's like, sure, the sunchokes are going to take more time to prep. And the walking onions are going to take, but you know what? Still cheaper than going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I also want to talk about, let's grow some hazelnuts and some apples and maybe some apricots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like now you've got all that ease that you're looking for combined with ease of growth, ease of like it just keeps growing every year and you don't have to do anything except harvest. It's already there. And on top of that, I like the idea of like, let's take our potatoes. So I don't know. I think we've got a bunch of potatoes growing all over the place here that are it's our 4th year of us not planting any potatoes there, but we keep pulling potatoes out of the ground right there. I mean, if you're going to not till, if you're going to not do things that destroy those potatoes from 4 years ago, they'll keep pumping out potatoes in that spot for years. At least for us, they do. So, and yes, potatoes. There was a guy, I once had dinner with a guy that was a native dude, and he was kind of an expert on being a native dude. And I remember we're doing dinner, he's like, somebody at the table said something about like, well, don't you want to eat the foods from 500 years ago? And he's like, hell no. And he said, just look at the potato. The closest thing that we add to a potato here is camas. And those things are tiny. And not only that, but it's like in order to cook them properly, it's at least a day of cooking, let alone the harvest and everything. But with potatoes, you hardly have to cook them at all. And they're delicious and they're huge. They're so easy. Potatoes are amazing. I want to thank white people for coming here and bringing us potatoes. So, camas apparently sucks. I mean, I've eaten camas. It's lovely. I've had camas when it was cooked for 2 days, and I can tell you it's delicious. But like, the total amount of effort per speck of camas is a lot. So potatoes, I mean, potatoes will be your potatoes. They're gonna fill in all those gaps and stuff. And camas is more of a tasty treat if somebody puts in all the time and stuff. So, and now Samantha's joining us. Cool. Samantha, you did not grow a GAMCOD plot last year, but you are going to grow a GAMCOD plot this year. Is that right?
I am, and I grew one the previous year when I first moved to this house. I grew it on the lawn. My first year in this property.
Delightful. Okay. So we were talking about gardening provides a tiny speck of novelty nibble. I don't even remember who I was asking anymore. Who needs to chip in some more on that one? Nobody?
I can pop
Clay.
in. Yeah, I mean, my first garden at this house was 2 years ago, and my first time ever growing carrots, and I grew over 5 pounds of carrots, and yeah, I mean, we eat carrots a lot, and I'm starting to ferment them thanks to Des, and I really I totally disagree with it that gardening necessarily will produce only a small amount of novelty food. I think that you can grow a major percentage of your own calories if you select the things and put in just a little bit of effort. It's well worth it.
Yeah, I carrots are a great example because you can eat those raw, and they're a moderate calorie food, not huge, but moderate. And I think for a GAMCOD plot, when somebody's trying to like prove how many calories they can grow, I'm not sure carrots would make the cut. Maybe they would. Might sprinkle them in here and there a little bit. Tim, do you have anything to add on this last misnomer?
No, I think it was pretty well covered.
So finishing up about the reason to do GAMCOD. Our mission is to guide level 1 people to growing food, resolving the misnomers. Then they will be at level 3, and all of our horticultural stuff seems cool. GAMCOD is a stepping stone to permaculture. So this is an attempt to grow a lot of food on dirt, demonstrating techniques that are cheap and easy. The mission is not to show off awesome level 5 to level 10 stuff. That'll all just seem crazy to people that we're trying to reach with this project. The mission is to help a level 1 person to shift from a list of stupid excuses to an actual garden. I want the submissions for this project to have a lot of focus on how simple, cheap, productive growing food can be with the worst soil. Experts showing how easy it can be. Of course, if an expert grows 2 or 3 plots and the focus is on these goals, and there's 30 seconds about, and here's my other plot where I added my special brand of magic, I think that would be cool. Maybe the second plot could be with soil instead of dirt, or with perennials, or all sorts of expansions. But those interesting things will be just a wee bit of frosting on the cake, not the main show. So, anything else about this whole thing about the reason to do GAMCOD? Nope. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the requirements for GAMCOD. So, 200 square feet. If you want to do something that's like I think Stephen did 8 feet by 25 feet, 10 feet by 20 feet. I kind of wonder if somebody might do like 4 feet by 50 feet or something like that, and just do a single raised bed or whatever. It's all cool. I don't think anybody's done a circle yet, and I think doing a big hugelkultur would be the wisest path. But I love to be shown how wrong I am. So 200 square feet. For this round of GAMCOD, we're only going to be accepting entries from places where it gets to 0 degrees Fahrenheit or colder sometime in the last 10 years. So if for the last 5 years, it got down only to 15 degrees, but this one time 7 years ago, it got down to 0, that's great. You're in. But for climates that are like they get down to, like the coldest they get is at 20 degrees Fahrenheit in 10 years, that's much warmer, and it's a different set of circumstances. And already Mike has been saying, like, because Mike, what's the coldest you've seen in the last 10 years?
I think I want to say negative 29, something like that.
Okay, so we've had 26 below here. So I mean, and I think a person could make the case of saying like, hey, that's not fair because it gets much colder for me than it does for some of these other people. And I kind of feel like, well, we had to draw the line somewhere. And I kind of feel like 0 degrees Fahrenheit is a pretty good line. We've had about 20 people say that they want to do GAMCOD, but they've never seen temperatures that low. And so we might circle back to them next year. But for now, for this year, we're sticking to the colder climates. So something about, 0 or the people that are the 10 below, the 20 below, stuff like that. That's going to be our peeps for now, for this project. The overall mission is to show that calories are cheap and easy. Oh, and we're calling it GAMCOD for now, but when we put the movie out, we might go with a different name. I'm not sure what that name might be, but I don't know. I like the name. I've gotten used to calling it GAMCOD. I don't know. It's a good enough name for me for now. when we originally started having these conversations, we did talk about like how much can you grow on a full acre, and so now we've limited it to 200 square feet, and then when somebody makes a submission, we say, well, if you grew it on a full acre, it would be this many calories, and so I'm comfortable doing that, and I think we're going to get a lot more people submitting attempts now, and that's what we want. Let's see, hoping to get 100 people or more that will submit video for this project. And we'll probably pick the best 6, but maybe it'll be the best 5, the best 7, something around there. It depends on what we see. Also, we've touched on the idea that each individual can grow more than one plot. Like they might grow 3 different plots that are all GAMCOD, and they want to do their best plot, because why not? They're going to grow a bunch of food anyway. And so let's break it into GAMCOD plots and see which one does the best. Let's see. The core of this is to show 6 great gardeners demonstrating great permaculture gardening practices to people that have never gardened before. The wedge is for the observers to conclude that gardening is cheap, easy, and productive. Calories per acre is the core. So that's so when we're going through and selecting the video that we're going to use for the movie, there's probably going to be a dozen different criteria. I mean, the quality of the audio and video is going to be part of it. The ability to describe what you're doing will be part of it. But when it comes to the actual GAMCOD plot, the number one thing is going to be the calories grown. Like those, like if we have 100, if we end up with a video from 100 different people at the very end, then and we're looking through them, I suspect that we're going to be focused. We're going to, first eliminate the bottom 60 people with the lowest calories, and we'll only look at the top 40 people with the most calories. That's my guess at this time. So calories is going to be the core of the project, the calories per acre. Let's see, 200 square feet must be clearly marked out at the start. It must be one contiguous piece, probably a rectangle or a circle. And I'm going to say, I should probably change that from probably to definitely a rectangle or a circle. Start with a dirt patch or lawn on dirt. Let's see. Note that 7 by 28 is less than 200 square feet and could hold a 7-foot tall hugelkultur. For this first attempt at a movie project, if your garden is an area that went to 0 degrees F or colder in the last 10 years, then it qualifies. Okay, already covered that. At least 5 crops that are generally known as food. You can find the foods in the organic grocery. No soy. Now, I know that it seems like every time I say no soy, I get people challenging me on that. And I imagine everybody on this call understands my thing about no soy. And I think we could probably fill an entire podcast talking about why not soy. But mostly political stuff. Monsanto owns all soy, no matter if you've been keeping the seed in your family for 200 generations or something. Monsanto still owns it. That's how patents work, and they have the patent on all soy. And so, and then people want to start talking about like their GMO soy and stuff like that, and it's like, yeah, they own that and the non-GMO soy, any soy, all of it. And then we could bring in the points that Mark Shepard makes about how soy is not good for you. It's basically a poison. And it's like whether you fermented it or not. And it's kind of like, that's a whole other angle. But I don't want to. So, all right, bottom line is not going to count soy. No soy. Polyculture is strongly encouraged. Optional, an additional 200 square foot plot that is planted with perennials. A summary in late summer about what the productivity might be like in 5 years and 10 years. That'd be cool. Gardeners are encouraged to use a ghost acre, a place where mulches and fertilizers are grown outside of the 200 square feet. Details about mulches and importing seeds, tubers, bulbs here. So there's a link from the GAMCOD 2025 thread to go and read more about mulches and fertilizers and growing your own. We basically want you to not import stuff. Okay, I'm kind of cruising through a lot of different things at once, but how about if I stop right there? For any of the things I've mentioned so far, does anybody have any comments about any of that? Doesn't look like a lot of activity other than Samantha touching her nose. Rebecca, you're
one thing that made this project harder for me this year was to not put in anything outside of my yard or 500 feet or whatever was the limit. And I usually use mulches from all over my town, which is like a mile. You know, it's not a big space. It's not intense to bring stuff from that far away. That would make a better garden for sure with better results.
Which I think would be a great thing to say into the video. However, I'm going to say that I have my reasons for it. I mean, there's going to be you attempting to submit to GAMCOD, to the movie, and bringing in materials. But then, like, if we've got somebody else who's going to attempt to submit GAMCOD stuff and they were to have brought in materials from more than 500 feet away, is it plausible that they brought in persistent herbicides? Is it plausible that they, took some other shortcuts, that the manure that they brought in was from a non-organic source and all that implies, etc.? And so I've drawn these lines for a bunch of different reasons. Another important reason, I think, is that I don't want the viewer to think that they cannot grow a garden unless they have access to the resources you have access to. I like the idea that they can grow a garden, provided that there is some stuff nearby. So like Thomas Elpel, author of Botany in a Day, wrote to me and he says he wants to do GAMCOD. And he says he wants to do it near a sheep shed that he has where there's a lot of sheep manure. And I'm kind of feeling like edge case, because, are the viewers going to say, like, I can't grow food unless I have sheep poop? And you might think, nobody's going to think that. And I will need to correct that. Pretty much everybody is going to think that. Like with rocket mass heaters, it's bizarre how I try to come up with the most boring looking rocket mass heaters, because I have heard people say that they've seen rocket mass heaters that were shaped like a dragon because they were working with cob. Why not make it beautiful? And then people were like, I can't have a rocket mass heater because I'm not able to make it look like a dragon. And it's like this becomes, and this is the thing that the GAMCOD project is about, eliminating stupid excuses. And so I'm concerned about that. Now, of course, if he submits 2 different GAMCOD plots, one with poopies and one without, we'll probably go with the one without. And then if we're going to use the one with because he refused to do anything else, I kind of feel like, well, that's okay, provided that we have all the other GAMCOD plots that are doing it without manures. So a person at the end can say, so I can do this without manures, but if I do have manures, it might be, better. Now, of course, then we kind of get into the problem of some people don't want to even try unless they can do the best. And so I don't have manure, so I'm not even going to try. See how it kind of, it's a very messed up, wackadoodle, complicated thing, which when you're a level 5 gardener, it's stupid. But, you know, if we're trying to address the level 1 excuses, it's critical. So, Rebecca, I lay this at your feet. Do you agree with my analysis? There was an eye roll. There was an eye roll. People, we have an eye roll. She's trying to figure out how to word this.
I think that resourcefulness in your neighborhood is a permy skill that is important. And if you're gathering leaves from your neighbors or grass clippings, I feel like that's really useful.
I think everything you said is true, and everything I will say to say don't do it is also true. Because if they're gathering leaves from neighbors, leaves or grasses from neighbors that have been treated with persistent herbicides, well, then it's a terrible idea.
That's true. So you have to know your neighbor. What?
Oh, I know my neighbor so good. My neighbor is beautiful, and my neighbor dresses so sharp, and my neighbor. So therefore, I want to interact with my neighbor so much that I'm sure all their stuff is great. Is it knowing your neighbor that makes it so that it doesn't have persistent herbicides?
It's talking to your neighbor and, having a dialogue.
Did you see the Wonka movie? That was terrific. Now I want your mulches. But no, the thing is that you got to be able to figure out whether or not that material has any persistent herbicides that it's been carried. Was there any persistent herbicide that touched any of this in the last 5 years, 10 years? Because persistent herbicides have a half-life of 7 to 11 years.
While I know that is a really big concern for legitimate reasons, I think most level 1 gardeners, that's like way over their head.
And which is why I think that we need to exclude that at this time. And later we can explore talking about that. I mean, trying to eliminate persistent herbicides from your mulches and also buying topsoil.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting well into level 3, level 4 conversations. And it's like, okay, let's make this really easy to understand. So, Rebecca, have I mitigated? I mean, everything you're saying is true, and everything I am saying is also true.
Yes.
Okay. And so,
what I hear you saying is, Rebecca, this is my competition, and if you want to do it, you must play by the rules. And I nod my head and say, yes.
Okay, good. And at the same time, this is the moment to explore the rules.
Okay.
And keep in mind that for 3 or 4 years now, we've been talking about GAMCOD, and people have challenged me on every speck of this already.
Totally.
So I am well prepared to address every question you have, which is why we're recording all this right now. So bring it. Come on, bring it. So let me back up a bit. I've mentioned a bunch of the rules so far, and there's the whole thing about the ghost acre, and you can't bring stuff from more than 500 feet away. And it's like, okay, do you have anything else along any of the things I've mentioned so far? Because I thought that was a good point to bring up. I could make a more glorious garden if I could bring in organic matter from farther away Like I've got a neighbor that lives half a mile away, all organic, and they have leaves, and another one has a sawmill, and it's all organic, and I can get the sawdust. And there's another one that's all organic, and it's horse poopies. And it's like, oh, if I could get to all of those things, I could do a garden that's so much more glorious.
Mhm.
That is all true. And I would say this is level 4 gardening that we're talking about when you're attempting to dodge persistent herbicides, which would destroy your garden. So, all right. Anything about any of the other bits that I brought up so far? Rebecca? No, you look content. Okay, no, she's good. Anybody else want to address any of the other things I've brought up so far?
I don't have a question or a contest or anything like that. But I have a day's worth of driving ahead of me, and the weather's not growing any better. So unfortunately, I have to step out.
Understood.
So sorry about that, everybody. I'll catch you later. Catch you at another time.
Drive safe.
Thanks for being here.
Never.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. The next item we have is we want to see practices far above organic. The wish is for the final movie to advocate not buying stuff and not risking the import of things that could be toxic. So, which is kind of what we were touching on. It's like I think that a level 1 gardener is going to accidentally import toxic stuff. Oops. And
Yeah.
so, all right, let's show them a simple way to do it where they don't import anything. That way they can be certain that they're not importing toxins into their gardening project. Unlimited irrigation. So explain how this is critical for building the soil. So in the future, you won't need as much irrigation. I think that you can build soil without any irrigation whatsoever. It's entirely doable. And of course, Mike talked earlier in this thing about how he didn't use any irrigation at all on his GAMCOD plot in 2024. At the same time, I want to open it up and say everybody can use as much irrigation as they want. Now, I would think that a skilled gardener is not going to overwater. A skilled gardener is going to demonstrate watering enough, but not too much. And of course, ultra skilled like Mike are going to demonstrate how they can use dirt and grow a garden without using any irrigation whatsoever. But it would be helpful to mention the rain that happened through the year. And I think that the people who do use the irrigation might point out, we haven't seen any rain for 2 months, so we're irrigating. Plus, not to mention the fact that a lot of times, I think when you have sunchokes on the top, they're very drought resistant. But if they start to wilt, that the water level is low. And so, better get some water on there. Those sunchokes look pretty pathetic. All right. Keep track of total time put in. Try to keep this low. Total money spent. Try to keep this low. Total money saved in groceries. Try to keep this high. We want people who watch the movie to know to their core that gardening is easy, delightful, productive, thrifty, and yummy. So any way that can be conveyed in the movie is terrific. Ooh, okay, here's the stuff about money. So we will put together a movie, and then we will then attempt to do a Kickstarter for the movie. But for whatever the final movie is, anybody who submits video that gets used, we will pay $400 per minute used in the movie. And so this means that if we use 30 minutes of video in the final movie, the payout will be $12,000. So further is that for big names, and I think down below I list what the names are, but I'm open to maybe a couple of others, but we'll get paid double. And anybody that is doing it at Wheaton Labs, so whether you're a boot or an ant or deep roots or a sepper or whatever you're doing, and I wouldn't be surprised if Samantha, who pops out here every couple of months, might pop out and cobble together a bit of a garden and then come back in a couple of months to keep it going or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And make her own little plot. Maybe Clay's been out here a few times. Maybe he'll do something like that as well. Mike has been out here many times, but he tends to be more of a come out once a year kind of a guy. Plus, but anyway, it could happen. I don't know. But if you do it here, the pay is double. And Rebecca's been out here many times too. In fact, Rebecca, you were a boot for one whole week once, a long time ago. And so... but if you do a plot here, popping out once in a while, the pay would be double if that video gets used. So $24,000 if 30 minutes are used. So, all right, those are the beginning notes that I have. Let's see, from the big names, Mark Shepard says he's going to do it. Joseph Lofthouse, the expert on landrace gardening, says he's going to do it. And Thomas Elpel says he's going to do it. Helen Attow wrote to say maybe. She's got a lot on her plate this upcoming year, but she might do it. All right. There, I said a lot of stuff. Has anybody got any comments on all the things I just said? Anybody? Mike?
Yeah, one question. If I presume none of us are the 12 bigs you're talking about, right?
That is true. That is true.
Okay, second question. If one of them submits some wonderful footage, puts a lot of work into it, but they didn't quite read the rules exactly as well as we did, and they maybe do something that doesn't meet the requirements, are they held to the same standards as us then too?
Probably. I think so. I mean, I like Mark Shepard is amazing. And I have only visited with him in person a couple of times. And my experience is that when talking to him, I'll say something, and then his response almost always begins with the word "but." So when I wrote to him about GAMCOD, he seemed genuinely enthusiastic, and we exchanged some emails, and I talked about the why, and I feel like he really gets it. He really understands and why there's the limitations and lines are drawn and things like that. And he appreciates it. And of course, he's already thinking, and I can't help but think he's going to do this. Perennial systems are vastly superior, always. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And so will he still submit a proper GAMCOD plot that might be, like, for example, sunchokes are perennials and they are the biggest calorie producer. But is he going to try to submit perennial plots and say, this is what GAMCOD should be, or something like that? I suspect he's not. I've already talked to him about it, but it is possible. And so you're right. If we've got Mark Shepard giving it a stab, do we kind of show Mark's stab and then say, Yeah, but it didn't really, burr, 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 or something. I'm not sure. I mean, this is so much easier to answer after all the footage has been received and we can look at it and see. I mean, I don't know if some handsome gal does the whole thing and she's completely naked the whole time. Are we going to use that footage even though it didn't quite meet other requirements? And it's like, I don't know. And if we get somebody who didn't quite meet some requirement, but boy, they took amazing videography, are we going to use that? I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, if we get like 7 submissions and we can barely have enough to put a movie together, we'll probably be a lot less picky than if we get 300. So, I don't know.
Maybe sauce. Got it. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the lines that I have drawn are very important, and I'm prepared to defend my lines. But at the same time, what do I do if I get only 7 submissions and 4 of them don't meet the requirements? And I want to, do I put together a movie? Do I wait another year? What's going to be the play? And so I don't have a clear answer for that. Does this help answer your question? Like I think you've asked a very good, simple question, and I've given you a relatively squishy answer.
Yep, that sounds it's about what I expected. So good work.
I hope that we get so many good submissions that if somebody submits something that does not qualify, that we will just instantly reject it. And it's like, I don't know, I could have been more clear. So, all right. So Andreas is sharing a message. How will Mark Shepard live up to the dirt requirement? It's got to be pretty pure soil at their place now. I imagine Mark Shepard still has some patches of dirt. And I wouldn't be surprised if he knows of neighbors that have patches of dirt. Mark Shepard, I think, Mark Shepard definitely knows the difference between dirt and soil. And I think that he would be very jazzed I think he'd like to be able to show off how to do this because he's a pro. And so he knows the difference. He will find a way. And I think he would be excited to do that part of it, to demonstrate. But Mike's also got a point. It's possible that Mark would be like, that's just dumb, so I skipped it. And it's like, it seems unlikely, but I suppose it's possible. All right. Anybody else have any questions about any of this? No? So I think at this point in time, I'm ready to kind of wrap up. I mean, it's only been 3 hours we've been doing this. And I think we've kind of really covered a lot of good content. And I'm excited about making this movie. I'm excited for people to try out this whole project and submit pictures and videos and stuff. I know that I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the results from this year, but I think we had three successes where only one of them met the requirements. And so it's like kind of hard to make a movie out of that. And so it's like, okay, let's try it again. But it's like, am I doing that right? Were there 3 people that I think there was a 4th person that made it to the finish line, but what they submitted, the results weren't very good. It was like, like a 10th of the food that what other people were reporting. But I'd love to see something. I'd like to see a lot more. And so to that end, the amount of payout is, I think 4 times greater now. So a guy we refer to as the benefactor sent me a giant bale of money because he's so jazzed about the entire GAMCOD project. So now our payout per minute is 4 times bigger than what it was a year ago. Hopefully this will entice a lot more people to submit. And so, but I'm excited about it. I think that this project it's finally happening. This is going to be the year, I think. After all these years of dilly-dallying with all kinds of different flavors of GAMCOD, I think we're finally going to see it happen. Anybody got any other questions, comments, thoughts about the GAMCOD project for 2025? All right.
Bring it on.
If you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about gardening, homesteading, and permaculture all the time.
All the time.
Thank you.